All right, so let's talk planning 2026 as a leader. Now, as an individual, as the person, I don't think there's a shortage of ways to think about how to plan your year. There are so many things out there. But if you're leading an organization, if you're somebody who's responsible for multiple systems, multiple people, and have to make decisions across all these different systems, it can be a bit overwhelming when it comes to thinking about planning. What do you do? What do you not do? How do you organize things? How do you structure things? So, companies tend to bring in different consultants, do a bunch of different things. But I believe as a leader, it's your primary responsibility to have a bird's eye view of your entire organization and to have some intention for how they're going to operate, even if you're going to bring somebody from the outside to facilitate a specific aspect of it. So my goal in this video is to give you a framework on how you can think about the different parts of your organization, the questions to ask, and how you should approach planning for each of those. So at least how you should approach having some thesis and some ideas for how to plan for each of them, right? So let's switch views here and let's get into it. All right, cool. So I don't care what organization it is that you're running or what kind of company it is you're running. And it doesn't matter if it's big or small, you are most likely going to deal with 6 core systems, right? And most of the systems can be folded into these 6 systems, or maybe there are a few variations or a few different things. But generally, every business organization will have these 6 systems at play. And if you're a leader, from a planning perspective, you should be able to think about the 6 systems and kind of consider how you're going to operate within the 6 systems, right? So the first one is, am I recording? Yeah, I'm recording. All right. The first one is leadership clarity, right? And we'll talk about this. Very important. The second one is strategy. The third one is brand. The fourth is products, or we can say service. That's too thick. And then we have ops, operations and delivery. Then we have community and networks, right? So let's get into it. Leadership clarity. What is it? I think when most leaders think about the success and the growth of the organization, it's very easy for them to leave themselves out, right? They will look at everything else and somehow forget that they are the most influential part of the organization. Despite what modern leadership theory, or what people call modern leadership theory, is, and the kinds of things that people like to share on the internet, I fundamentally believe that in most organizations, 90+% of organizations, the leader is a core piece of that organization and is probably the most influential part of the organization, right? Most organizations are either a pyramid, or they are some kind of hub and spoke, okay? You rarely have organizations that are like flat and decentralized networks. You're either dealing with a pyramid or you're dealing with like a hub and spoke model. But whichever of those two things you're dealing with, the leader sits smack at the most influential point. If you're dealing with like a hub and spoke, the leader is the center. If you're dealing with a pyramid, the leader is the top. Now, what that means is that the leader's state of mind, their own clarity, their own strengths, weaknesses, their limitations, all that the leader is eventually impacts the rest of the organization, right? It doesn't matter what kind of organization it is. It doesn't matter what company it is. So if a leader is clear in what they need to do, if they have the emotional capacity, if they are growth driven, if they are, paying attention to the market, like whatever organization it is, the leader is eventually going to influence the entire organization based on how they operate and who they are. So when you start thinking about growing your company, when you start thinking about changing things in your company, when you start thinking about how to make your company make progress and improve, the very first thing that you have to consider is yourself. Where are you? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What do you need to work on? What do you need to improve? And a question to think about is, if your team were to define your leadership with one sentence, what would that sentence be? Would it be empowering? Would it be restricting? Would it be, helpful? Would it be clear, or would it be confusing? That work, I think, is the most underrated work in 2026 that every single leader has to do. And there's a framework for that. We're not going to go into details, but just to kind of hint at it, there's a framework for that I call soul and systems, right? I believe that every single leader is operating on the soul level and on the systems level. So the very first thing is you need to sit with yourself as a leader and have clarity on what kind of organization you're trying to build, of what your strengths are, of what your weaknesses are, of the vision that you have for your life and for the organization. Because your organization is a part of your life, and what happens in your life affects your organization and vice versa. So if you're not spending time thinking about that, if you're not clear as a leader on those specifics, it really doesn't matter what you do. In points 2 to 6, eventually they're all going to be affected by yourself. So that is the very first thing, and probably the most important thing that so many people don't pay attention to. So one, if your team was to define, your leadership in one word, what would it be? And two, if there is one thing that has to be true for you to be the kind of leader that will make the most progress for your organization in 2026, what would that be? Right? Answering those two questions is going to give you like a huge leg up, and I think will set the tone for everything else that you're trying to do in your organization, however you think of it, however you phrase it. Now, domain number 2, strategy. So what is strategy? Well, strategy is basically a set of choices that you make to allow you to attain a particular goal. That is a very, very simple definition of it. Now, there are more complex definitions. If you really want to read about strategy, my favorite person is Roger Martins. He has a book called Playing to Win. And I think there's also Richard Rumelt that wrote Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. So a reading list for you, right? If you want to delve into strategy yourself, look at those two people. But essentially, you don't have unlimited anything, okay? You don't have unlimited resources. You don't have unlimited time. You don't have unlimited energy. So it means that in 2026 and moving forward, you're going to have to make some choices about what you would do, but more importantly, what you will not do. Strategy is basically making those choices and then creating systems, policies, approaches that support the decisions so you can eventually get the outcome that you want. Most leaders, I think, overcomplicate what strategy is. So they end up having a lot of complicated plans and ideas and then calling them strategy. A strategy is a choice. It's a choice about what destination you want to go to, you want to get to. It's a choice about how you're going to get to that destination. It's a choice about what you need, what you're going to do. And it's also a choice about what destinations you're not going to go to, right? So when it comes to thinking about strategy, I think the one thing that is most important in your planning for your organization is to have a not to do list, right? We write to do lists. We write so many different to do lists, but at the end of the day, what you choose not to do is probably more important than what you choose to do, because it organizes the time, the energy, the attention of the rest of your organization. And most leaders, I think when we are thinking about the year, we come to our teams with a lot of things to do, but we don't have, a list of things not to do. And I think that causes a lot of confusion, right? Which is why your team members are confused, which is why they're like, oh, we have this long list of ambitions and things, but we don't have the resources, right? So because you have limited resources, time, energy, you have to make decisions. What is not going to get done? Where are we going to go? Where are we not going to go? And be extremely clear on that. That's thing number 2 when you're thinking about strategy. So I think the question there is, for our organizations to succeed, for organizations to get to the place where we need to get to and hit the goals that we've set for ourselves, what are the things we are not going to do in order to be able to give us clarity and the focus to apply the resources that we have properly to achieve that goal. Now, thing number 3. So we've done leadership, clarity, we've done strategy. Thing number 3 is brand. Now, in short, the brand is a perception, right, that people have in their mind about you, your business, your company, your organization, right? And the reason brand is extremely important is that for the most part, most products are commoditized, right? Think about whatever it is you're doing, whether it's a service or it's a product. Chances are there's somebody else in the market doing the exact same thing. But the question is, why would somebody choose to come with you instead of go with them, right? Typically, it comes down to that perception. Because we are tribe driven, okay? We tell ourselves stories. I'm wearing this black t-shirt because of something. I'm set up this way because of something. You're probably watching my videos because of a specific reason. And let's say if we were to consider somebody as a consultant or a guide, there's a reason you choose me and not choose someone else, right? Human beings, we give ourselves all these different reasons to choose where we go and who we do business with and which businesses we engage with, what products, what services we buy. Your brand basically allows you to create the kind of perception that will attract the person that you want. And it's very crucial in 2026 because most of the differentiating factors are beginning to unify, right? Whether it's supply chain, that's a lot more accessible now. Whether it's technology, that's a lot more accessible now. So the decision-making points for a lot of organizations is going to become brand, right? Whether they like this business or whether they think this is the kind of business that will help them get to their goals. Now, if you're in Africa, there is a caveat to that because Africa really does well in relationships, especially in B2B businesses, which I'm guessing is like most of my audience, right? So if you're in B2B businesses, relationships are like a big part of your brand and how people perceive you. So your brand building is going to cut across that as well. So your brand building is not just going to be like your public narrative or your internal team narrative. It's probably going to be like your network narrative. And we'll talk about community and networks like as a separate bucket later on. But building this perception is very, very crucial. Now, remember how I said strategy is a set of choices? There's strategy in your brand as well, right? So that's what you might call your brand strategy, right? That's where you're going to talk about how do we position ourselves in the market? Who do we want to speak to? What do we want to say to them? How do we want to be perceived? What are we going to do? What are we not going to do? How do we, what do we say? What do we not say? How do we show up? How do we present ourselves? Those are all decisions that you have to make within the branding phase. And then this will now apply to all the things downstream that people normally talk about, whether that is, your logo, your colors, your outfit, your customer support, all that good stuff. But brand is extremely important. So you have to start thinking about how do our business want to be remembered? How do I want people to remember our business as we go into like 2026? Because that will make a big difference in everything else. All right, cool. So now let's talk about products or service. Everything we've spoken about so far, you can call it as meta, right? The leader's clarity, your strategy, your brand systems. But product or service is where the rubber meets the road, right? This is the tangible deliverable that you're giving to the customer. This is the thing that they're paying you money in exchange for. And when it comes to your product or service, the question to think about is, what is the most important job we are doing in the lives of our customers? One, and two, what is an equally important job that our customers need us to do that we are not doing? Those are the two questions, right? Because ultimately, if I choose you because I have a certain perception, and then I get to taste your product or your service and my expectations are not matched, I'm going to feel disappointed, right? So as important as all these things are, they are promises, right? So when the customer finally gets a chance to interact with the product, the brand, and the service, you have to be able to deliver, right? So what is a tangible thing? Now, if you haven't spoken to your customers up until this point, this is the time to speak to them. Pick your top 10 customers, pick your top 10 regular highest paying customers and ask them, hey, what do we do for you? Why do you keep us around? Why do you keep paying us? Like the services and the products we offer, which part of these things really solve a problem for you? And if there is something else that we can do to, bring 10 times more the value to your life, what would that be? One more question to put under the brand of the product section is, what is it that we're doing currently that you really don't care about? Right? Because there is this notion of like supply side thinking and demand side thinking, right? Which is also like another concept that I think every leader should be aware of. So check out the work of Bob Moista and Clay Christensen. They are people that I think you should absolutely listen to. And they have this idea called jobs to be done, right? And this notion of demand side thinking, which is how is the customer thinking about the thing that you're doing? So what you're selling is not what people are buying. You have to understand that. You may be selling something, but people are buying something else. And your job, when it comes to figuring out how to build a product or a service that really, really works, is to understand what are people buying when they choose my business. And then to refine, right, your service or your product to that degree. And then also discover what do people want that we are not doing for them that is extremely important and is crucial. And what are we doing currently that we need to get rid of, right? So when it comes to product, those are the questions you should be asking. And this is going to determine where you put your effort, where you put your energy. Now, remember how I said strategy is about making a set of choices. There's a reason why I put strategy first, because strategy can be appended to everything else. So when you're making those choices in your brand, it's called brand strategy. When you're making those choices in your product, it's called, where's the product? It's called product strategy or service strategy, right? But you have to think about those choices and you have to make sure that you're giving time to think, okay, what do we do? And this is a place where you need to speak to your customers, speak to your customer support staff. You need to speak to the front line to really understand what is happening and what insight you can take away to help you decide what to do in 2026, right? So that is product to service. Now, ops and delivery, right? So if your product or your service is the thing that you're giving to the customer or customers, your operations and your delivery is the people right? Plus the systems that allows you to deliver that particular thing, right? And like you can see, they feed into each other. So even if we do have the perfect product or the perfect service or the most fitting, because there's no such thing as perfect, even if you have all those things dialed down, right? Not having the people and the system to support the consistent and excellent delivery of that particular service or product is a problem, right? And you have to make sure it is dialed in. So if we are delivering a particular service or product, do we have the right people? What do our people need to know? Do we have the right systems, right? And when it comes to ops and delivery, I think it's crucial to treat these two things with equal importance, right? Most leaders or companies, organizations tend to overemphasize one over the other, right? So they are overly reliant on people and under reliant on systems, or they're overly reliant on systems and under reliant on people. But the truth is they don't work without each other, right? The right people in the wrong system is going to be chaos. The right system with the wrong people is going to be inefficient. So you need to ask, do we have the right people in the right seat? And do we have the right systems to support them? So this is where your technology, HR, your culture, this is where all these different things come into play. So again, there's a set of strategies that you need to have here. And as a leader, right, this is also one of those things where you have to spend a lot of time on and make some hard decisions. The principle is, does it make the boat go faster? Okay. So if you have a boat, I don't know who shared that principle. I can't remember. Let's say if you have a boat, okay. Am I drawing the boat well? If you have this boat and, you know, you're on a river, on a sea, and you're driving somewhere, you need to ask yourself, okay, for every single person that I keep in this organization, do they help the organization do better, move faster? For every single system that I keep, does it help the organization move faster, do better? Same thing for removing things. I can tell you that there are some people you need to let go of. There are some systems you need to stop using, and there are others you need to bring in. But if you're not really thinking clearly about your people and your systems, you're not going to be able to make that decision. But again, remember, strategy is the lead of this particular thing, because if you don't have a clear strategy, if you don't have a clear goal of where you're trying to go and how you intend to get there, you would not know what brand to build. You would not know what product to build. You would not know what service to actually build, right? So it's extremely important that you take the time to answer those questions. But your people and your strategy is important. And another reason why brand is crucial, brand affects your people strategy, right? So when businesses think about brand, I think they think about it mostly in the consumer facing aspect, right? So if you tell a business, hey, we need to build a brand, they're usually thinking about, right, consumers. But branding is two-faced. You have the external, but you also have the internal, right? So this is the external. But you also have the internal brand, right? So these are your employees. Can I draw this? I've not drawn in a very long time. These are your employees, right? This is the people who believe in your company, who want to work with your company. The perception and ideas that they have about the kind of organization you are, how you treat people, and so on and so forth. All these things actually play into the kind of people that you hire, right? In addition to your compensation. So I remember in 2018, 2019, employer branding was such a big deal. I don't hear much about this anymore. But employer branding is like a really, really big thing. It used to be a very big thing. So your brand is not just about the external people, but it's also about the internal people. So whatever promise or perception that you're trying to build is to help you attract customers, but also help you attract the talents that will deliver the product or the service for those customers, right? So when it comes to people and systems, like brand is also crucial there, right? We've spoken about ops and delivery, right? Now, community and networks. This one is interesting because most business owners know it intuitively, right? But there is no strategy, so it doesn't scale beyond them, okay? Your business doesn't exist in isolation. It exists in a network of other systems, right? So whatever it is you're running, you're dealing with employees, you're dealing with customers, you're dealing with supply chain, you're dealing with partners, investors, regulators. Like you have an ecosystem around you that actually helps you do whatever it is you're doing, or that regulates whatever it is that you're doing. And because of that, you need to know which part or which fractal of that ecosystem is really crucial to the goals you're trying to achieve. And you need to nurture that, right? You need to build that community. Now, building community is not like especially on the investor advisor, ecosystem fractal perspective. It's not just about like sending out calendars at the end of the year, which a lot of people do. So a lot of businesses throughout the entire year have zero engagements with their communities, right? No dinners, no event, no lunches, like nothing. But then on Christmas, they're going to make a list and then they're going to send out a bunch of gifts. And they typically think that is enough. Whilst I think that is necessary and that is crucial, it is not enough. You need to have a strategy for how you're going to engage your community throughout the entire year, right? What are we doing in Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4? How do we want to engage these people? How do we want to build our relationships? Now, typically, in most African businesses, the MD or the CEO or the business development manager is going to do a good chunk of this, right? Because their job is to network. But I think at an organizational level, you also should have a strategy for how to engage that community, especially on the supply side, right? When it comes to partners, investors, ecosystem regulators, employees, like all that good jazz. So have a strategy for it. And you should also approach it in a way where they benefit from it, right? They get some benefit from that as well. So it's an important thing. And then on the consumer side, right, you also need to build that community. What are you doing to engage people that are buying from you, right? Are you inviting them to dinners? Are you doing events? Are you hosting webinars? Like, how are you engaging them? How are you building a communal benefits for them beyond your products? Now, when it comes to building community, an important thing to understand is that if multiple people choose your business, chances are they have similar value systems, right? Or they get similar value, or they think about the world in a very similar way. So your goal of building community is not so that you can gather people so they can buy more from you, but your goal of building community is to gather people so that they can benefit from each other, right? That is a very important thing. So you do need to have a strategy for how you're going to build and engage and scale your communities. I think these are the 6 different domains, whether you're an NGO, whether you're a for-profit, whatever it is, that you have to pay attention to. So if you look at your plan for 2026, if you look at the things that you're trying to do, if you look at the list of things in front of you and you realize that one of these things is missing and you haven't thought about it, it's time for you to go back and review and ask yourself the questions of how do we actually start the process of improving and deciding what we need to do in those areas. And like I said from the beginning, you don't have to do everything yourself. If you figure out these areas, then you also know who to bring in and what to tell them when you bring them in. So the question is, have you planned your 2026? And if you have they covered all the 6 areas? If not, which areas are left? Put it in the comment section and see you around. Happy New Year.